So welcome and thank you to everyone for joining us today. As folks kind of trickle on, I'm going to get started. We are bringing this to you today on behalf of the Lake Erie Watershed Protection Alliance, and I am the coordinator for that. My name again is Joanna Panazowitz, and we are going to be taking all of the questions for this webinar at the end. So go ahead, put those in the chat as you think of them. You can also use the Q&A option as well, which I believe you can access in the far right bottom of your screen if you're on a computer, or again in those three dots, the more options. If you're on a mobile device, you'll probably find it there. Whichever one is easier for you, go ahead and type your questions in when you think of them. We will be taking those at the end. I see there's a hand raised, Josh. Do you want to take that question before we get started? I see you're chatting with the person. So welcome, thank you again. Please take that poll that's on your screen. I'm going to be closing that after the second slide, so make sure you get your answers in for that. The reason we're asking for that is because we're going to test your knowledge. At the end, we're going to ask these questions again, and hopefully you'll have learned the answers to these questions, as well as a lot of other really great information. So again,
I do see that.
Oh,
I'm sorry. I'm going to interrupt you. I do see that two people are having trouble hearing. Oh, I mean, I guess it doesn't make sense. I will just chat to them because, of course, they cannot listen to me. Sorry.
Great, thanks. So again, I'm Joanna Panazowitz. I'm the coordinator for the Lake Erie Watershed Protection Alliance, and we're bringing you the Septic Smart for Lake Erie workshop. It is funded by the Community Grants Program through the New York State Pollution Prevention Institute. And you can see that disclaimer on the screen there. Funding is provided by the Environmental Protection Fund as administered by the New York State Department of Environmental Conservation. Any opinions, findings, and/or interpretations of data contained herein are the responsibility of the authors and do not necessarily represent the opinions, interpretations, or policy of Rochester Institute of Technology and its New York State Pollution Prevention Institute or the state. So there's my little disclaimer for you. Whoops, apologize for that. So today we're going to be starting with me talking about septic systems and water quality. So why is it important that you maintain your septic system? And then we're going to hear from an expert on how your septic system works and what proper septic system maintenance looks like. And then, as I mentioned, we're going to have time for questions at the end. So go ahead, as we're going through this, type your questions into the chat box or the Q&A function, and we will try to get to all of those at the end. In order to be eligible for the rebate, like I said, you must participate in the entire webinar. We're going to have you answering the poll questions at the beginning and the end. And you will be eligible if you live in one of the LUPA counties, which I will get into in a moment, or you live within the Lake Erie watershed. So just in case there happens to be someone registered who's downstate or something like that, you're only eligible if you're in this Western New York region for that rebate based upon the funding. And we are also planning in-person septic workshops this fall. So there's going to be one in Erie County, one in Cattaraugus County, and one in Chautauqua County. So be on the lookout for those. If you found this helpful, let your friends, relatives, neighbors know. Same idea, folks who attend those in-person workshops will be eligible for a septic system pump out rebate as well. So I'm going to go ahead and close this poll. It looks like many people have finished. If you haven't hit submit, please hit submit. All right. And then I'm going to stop sharing my screen, and hopefully Jennifer can start sharing hers. Perfect. So if you wouldn't mind moving to the next slide, please. All right. So what is a watershed? We're going to start off by explaining how watersheds work because you're going to hear that term a lot tonight. A watershed is basically an area of land where all of the water that flows over the surface or underneath the surface goes to a particular body of water. So watersheds can be all sorts of different sizes. You can have a watershed for your backyard pond, and that might just include areas of your yard that drain to that pond. Or it can be large, like the Great Lakes watershed, sometimes also called a basin, the Great Lakes Basin. And that means all of the area that drains to the Great Lakes. So today we're going to be focusing on the New York State portion of the Niagara River Lake Erie watershed. So for this illustration, think about this area as portions of Western New York that all drain to Lake Erie. So you're going to have a high point or a ridge line all along the edge, and that's where water on one side is going to flow into one watershed and water on the other side is going to flow into a different watershed. And as it's running off the surface, it's going to go over different types of land use or land cover. So it might flow through a forest, or it could flow over a farm. It could also flow through an urbanized area or a suburban development. And along the way, it's going to pick up things from the ground. So that could be something like some motor oil that dripped. It could be pet waste. It could be fertilizers or pesticides. It could be septic systems that have kind of bubbled up and overflowed. And all of that pollution is considered non-point source pollution because we can't necessarily pinpoint the exact area it came from. And that's what the Lake Erie Watershed Protection Alliance is working to try to prevent. So we're trying to protect water quality by addressing these non-point source pollution sources. So today we're going to focus on septic systems specifically. And if you can go to the next slide. The Lake Erie Watershed Protection Alliance includes Cattaraugus, Chautauqua, and Erie counties. So you can see in the green there, that is the Niagara River Lake Erie watershed. So that is all of the land area that drains to Lake Erie and the Niagara River within New York State. On the right, those different colors represent sub-watersheds or smaller watersheds within that larger watershed. And all of those drain to Lake Erie and the Niagara River. So in areas where you have more urbanized areas, like the city of Buffalo, you're not going to have very many septic systems. But in the outer edges of this watershed, that's where we typically have a lot of areas that have septic systems. As you can see, all of Erie County is included in that, and then portions of 7 other counties are in that watershed. So the reason why Cattaraugus, Chautauqua, and Erie counties are the only ones in the Lake Erie Watershed Protection Alliance is because those other counties are part of a different organization called FLOPA, or the Finger Lakes Lake Ontario Watershed Protection Alliance. So because they have areas of land that drain into the Finger Lakes and Lake Ontario, they're separate from LUPA. So in case you were wondering, that is why only folks who are in Erie County, Cattaraugus County, or Chautauqua County, or in those other counties but within the Lake Erie watershed will be eligible for this rebate. All of this information is pertinent to everyone though, and everyone who attends today will be eligible for door prizes. So just a little bit of background about LUPA. We formed in 2012, so we're 10 years old this year. And we formed because of flooding and water quality issues, specifically around Cattaraugus Creek, which forms the boundary between Cattaraugus and Erie counties. And since then, we've worked on developing a watershed management plan. We've worked on implementing various projects such as invasive species management, erosion control to stabilize stream banks, installing green infrastructure. So a lot of different projects, all with the goal of helping to improve or protect water quality and also to address flooding issues. So you can get more information if you'd like on that website there, erie.gov/LUPA. And if you can go to the next slide. Very basic and quickly, I'm going to talk about how septic systems work. So on a very, very high level, the wastewater from your septic, or from your house rather, enters your septic tank. And if everything is working well, that's treated and the effluent is released and we don't have problems. But if it's not working well, if there's a problem, that's when contaminants from that tank can leach out either onto the surface. So you might notice like a soggy area of your yard that's puddling up with some wastes in it, or it can percolate down into the groundwater. And that can include nutrients such as nitrogen or phosphorus, or it can include bacteria. And so if your septic tank is malfunctioning, if your whole system is malfunctioning, that can end up impacting groundwater or surface water. Next slide, please. So what does that mean? Well, it's like having a toilet in the middle of your yard. And the results are you can get Cladophora algae, which you might have noticed if you've gone to the beach at all. There's large, thick mats of what we consider nuisance algae. It's not particularly harmful, but it's annoying. You can slip on it. It's like it gets stuck in your toes. It's on rocks. And as it breaks down, it's using up bacteria or using up oxygen, and it can smell pretty bad. So we want to prevent that from growing. Also, harmful algal blooms. You may have heard about these. Locally, we've seen them in Ellicott Creek, but they also are a big problem on the western portion of Lake Erie. And the problem with that is blue-green algae can form a toxin called microcystin that's harmful to people as well as wildlife. So it can hurt us if we're trying to drink that water. It can hurt us if we're trying to swim or recreate in the water. And it can harm our pets and wildlife as well. So we definitely want to prevent the nutrients that cause those algae to grow from entering that system. Similarly, bacteria. If bacteria enters the system, you've got E. coli and different types of bacteria that can cause illness either in your drinking well or in a source water area. So if there's a reservoir in your town, or even it could get out to the lake, it causes problems with the drinking water. It can close beaches, so you can't swim, or it can cause problems if you just want to go out and canoe or kayak or stand up paddleboard. You know, all of those things can be impacted if there's bacteria in the water, and it can cause gastrointestinal illness. And if you're immunocompromised, it can cause some severe illness as well. So we want to make sure that we're keeping our septic systems in tip-top shape, working well, preventing them from discharging nutrients or bacteria to our waterways, either through storm drains or ditches near your home, or if you do happen to live right along a creek or a stream, all of that will eventually end up in our waterways. So next slide, please. Also, you should consider usage. So there's been this kind of pandemic thing happening the past couple of years, and this graph is designed to show you how, as government restrictions went into place in early 2020, the number of telework jobs also increased. So if you're able to, there should be a little hand icon at the bottom of your screen. Raise your hand if you had to work from home more than you ever did before in the past 2 years, or if you had someone in your home who was homeschooling and not normally homeschooling. So I'm seeing a lot of hands up right now. I think it's pretty normal that in the past 2 years, we've had a lot more folks at home. And if you're at home, you're using your toilets, you're using your sinks. Maybe you were even bored during the pandemic when we couldn't go anywhere and you were cleaning curtains or whatever. So keep that in mind. The past 2 years, you've probably used your septic tank more than you had in the past. And so you may be due for a pump out sooner than you normally would. Another thing to consider about that is if you have some sort of a big barbecue, like a graduation party or just having a lot of friends over, if you have a lot of folks coming in and using your bathroom in a short amount of time, that can cause increased usage on your septic tank as well. So you want to keep that in mind. You might want to consider renting a porta-john or one of those facilities that can be dropped off if you're planning on having a large gathering at your home to help save your septic system and help reduce the load on that and potentially the maintenance that you need to do. So now I'm going to introduce Jennifer Delaney, who's the Director of Environmental Health for Erie County. And she's going to go over how your septic system works and how to properly maintain it so we can make sure that we're protecting our waterways and also saving you money in the long run. So thank you.
Good evening, and thank you for joining us today. So I'm going to start with basics on how a septic system actually functions, and what it consists of. So a septic system, or what we are now calling an on-site wastewater treatment system, includes the septic tank as well as whatever follows that. In most cases in this area, you will find it's a sand filter followed by a downstream absorption system. In areas with good soils, it'll be what we call a conventional trench system or leach lines. But for the large majority of our area, it is going to be a sand filter. So this is just a basic drawing of how our sand filter layout works. Sewage leaves the house, enters the septic tank. Sometimes there's a pump tank following the septic tank, sometimes there's not. That effluent enters the sand filter, is usually going to a pump tank following that, and then is distributed out through the distribution system. So as the water flows through, what is each component of your system actually doing for you to treat that wastewater? So the septic tank, how does it work? What is its purpose? The main purpose of your septic tank is to take your wastewater and put it into 3 different categories. So as the water moves into the tank, your lighter solids like grease, hair, and soap will float to the top, and your heavier solids will settle to the bottom and form what we call a sludge layer. In between there is a layer of just not so pleasant liquid. That liquid will make its way out through usually an outlet filter and go into your sand filter or leach lines or conventional trench system. So as you know, there's bacteria that's in this tank, and the bacteria in the tank begin to break down some of the sludge into some simple nutrients and gas and water. This allows the sludge layer to be turned into some liquids, and it just reduces that down. The scum layer on the top typically stays there. It's not something that goes away over time, which is part of why it's important to get your septic tank pumped out so that we can get rid of the excess greases and hair and soaps, and also so that any of that sludge material that accumulates on the bottom of the tank that isn't easily broken down over a relatively short period of time, we can get that out of there to prevent backups and clogging of your drain field or your sand filter in the future. Often these days, our septic tanks will include an outlet filter. These filters are there to help prevent any solids from leaving your septic tank and getting into your sand filter or leach field. That being able to prevent that from happening helps keep solids from blocking up the rest of your system. So as the liquid leaves through the outlet, it enters the sand filter. With a sand filter, you have a top layer of pipes, and below that you will have sand media, followed by stone, and 2 collector lines underneath that. So as the wastewater trickles down through the sand layer, the wastewater moves through the sand, particulates and pathogens are removed. There is bacteria present in the sand, which helps to break down larger particles, and it will help to pathogens to die off in the sand. Is that it's not a conducive area for pathogens to survive. There's not a lot of oxygen. As the wastewater is collected in the pipes underneath the sand layer, it is then transferred on into a inspection tank or a pump tank. This inspection tank or pump tank then will have the water flow to the downstream absorption system. This will be one of two things for the most part. It is just a set of distribution lines, much like a conventional trench system, just built slightly above the clay layer, usually built into the topsoil. The main purpose of this downstream absorption trench system is to help dissipate the water that's accumulated from your septic tank and sand filter. So although your septic tank and your sand filter help to remove a lot of the pathogens and solids and bacteria from your wastewater, they don't absorb the water that moves through the system. So we need a place for that water to go at the very end. And that is what the purpose of the downstream absorption trench system is, to help dissipate that water. This is why often, especially during the spring and fall, you will find the area next to or near your downstream absorption system to be wet. They do, and they are intended to kind of weep. The reason why we use a sand filter is because our underlying soils are things like clays and silts that do not accept water easily. If you have a yard that's got a lot of clay, you'll notice when it rains heavy, you may have standing puddles of water. But after a day or two, that water will recede and soak back down into the ground. It just takes a lot longer for water to move through clay and silt soils than it would something that's a little bit more sandy, a little bit more permeable. So a conventional trench system or a leach field works much in the same way. Your wastewater enters a septic tank. It separates out into the scum layer, the liquid layer, and the sludge layer. The liquid flows through the septic tank into what we call a distribution box, which is quite literally a concrete box with several pipes that stick into it, and that helps to evenly distribute the water over the course of all of the pipes in your leach field. The reason we want to do that is we want to be able to ensure we are using the whole field and not just causing one line to be used to its end life and then go to the next line to the next line. Now, because your soils are much more porous and they're able to accept water easily, there is no need for any additional treatment after this point. The wastewater drains down into the naturally occurring soils where larger particles are eaten by naturally occurring bacteria and pathogens die off on their own. So it's a little bit about how an actual septic system works. One thing that's really important to make note of is that if you have your own private drinking water well, it's especially important that you pay attention to the maintenance on your septic system. Although New York State does require that when a septic system is installed, that it's installed at least 100 feet away from your drinking water well, there are still other conditions, and you want to make sure that your system is working well so there's no contaminants getting into your drinking water from your septic system. So that 100 feet seems like a really long distance, but especially in more porous soils, that untreated wastewater, if it's making its way through the septic system, can travel quite a distance before it gets to and can get to your well and cause you some concern and some issues. So what can we do to ensure that our septic system is well maintained and that it's functioning at its top ability and and performing all the jobs we want it to do? Well, there are some very basic sayings to help us remember what it is we should and should not be doing to our septic system. Those are: do think at the sink, don't overload the commode, do shield the field, don't strain your drain, and do protect it and inspect it. So first we have think at the sink. So what are some very common things we should and should not do when we are thinking about what we're putting down our sink drains? One of the biggest ones is don't pour cooking grease or oil down your sink or toilet. Not only can pouring cooking grease down your drains cause internal plumbing issues by depositing layers of grease in the pipe and eventually causing clogs and backups into your sinks, but it's also really bad for your septic tank. That grease gets in there and it causes a larger and larger scum layer, and it doesn't allow for water to flow freely through the septic tank. So when it comes to grease and cooking oil, we do recommend you put that grease or cooking oil into a container to harden before discarding it in the trash. Do not rinse coffee grounds into the sink. Coffee grounds don't really break down easily in a septic tank. And over time, when they mix with that grease layer and scum layer, it can cause basically like a giant ball of coffee grounds and grease to form in your septic tank. It's a very difficult thing to get rid of. One other thing you want to be aware of when you're thinking about your septic system is what household chemicals you're using and what you're to clean the house with. So harsh chemicals and bleach, especially ammonias, your bleach cleaners, they can have a negative impact on your septic tank. As I mentioned earlier, your septic tank is full of live healthy bacteria that break down those solids for you, so that those can be broken down and easier for you to pump out. By using harsh chemicals, what their intended purpose is to kill off bacteria, it will harm your septic tank by killing off those naturally occurring bacteria, not allowing them to do their job to break down those solids. So you're going to want to look for cleaners that don't have a lot of phosphorus and less harsh cleaners. There's a lot of great green products out there that don't use the bleach, that don't use bleach and ammonia as their main ingredient. One of the other things you would want to do is not wash hazardous chemicals down your drains, such as paint or paint thinner. I remember very clearly going to a house and the person was a painter and they liked to wash their paint brushes off in the basement laundry tub. When the contractor came out to the house, quite literally, they were going through just a layer of paint in their septic tank. It had accumulated and risen to the surface, basically essentially blocking the pipes from being able to transfer water as they were just saturated in paint. So in the cases where you have you're doing painting projects and that, be aware and don't rinse them off in your sinks in your house. The other thing we would recommend that you do is be aware of using a garbage disposal. Either limit your use of it or eliminate your use of a garbage disposal altogether. When you use a garbage disposal and you have a septic system, grinding up that food product and flushing it down the drain just adds additional solids to your septic tank. And although there's good bacteria in there to help break those solids down, it does take a good amount of time. So you don't want to build up that solids layer too quickly and then have to get your tank pumped out even more often. If you are going to use a garbage disposal, we highly recommend you get your tank pumped out more frequently, something maybe in the range of 2 to 3 years versus what we would recommend is 3 to 5. The other thing is consider things such as composting or, of those food scraps instead of actually using the garbage disposal. So we're on to don't overload the commode. There is only one thing and one thing only that you should be flushing down your toilet. That one thing is toilet paper. And you really should be using septic safe toilet paper. Non-septic safe toilet paper does contain oils and some other conditioners and detergents. Because of those oils and detergents, non-septic safe toilet paper takes an extremely long time to break down in your septic tank. In addition, it tends to float, dislodging that scum layer and sometimes causing a mixing of the scum in with the liquid layer and causing your system to clog and cause backups in your home. Some other really important things to not flush down your toilet: diapers, wipes, tissues, paper towels. All of these things are heavy and they do not break down. paper towels will take a very long time for the bacteria in your septic tank to break down, and they take up a lot of space. Diapers are just not biodegradable for the most part. Some other things that you should not be flushing: feminine hygiene products, condoms, cat litter, cigarette butts. These things are not easily broken down by the bacteria in your septic tank, and they will cause the solids layer to build up and possibly cause backups into your home. Other things not to flush: coffee grounds, food scraps. We just talked about that. Consider composting those items instead. Chemicals, household cleaners, and medications should not be flushed down your toilet. Erie County does offer household hazardous waste drop-off days, and there are drug drop-off kiosks throughout Erie County in varying communities locations. Medications and household cleaners and chemicals often do affect the bacteria that exists in your septic tank, causing them to die off and not be available to actually digest the solids in your septic tank. One other thing, because the question always gets asked, is what about septic tank additives? I see these commercials on TV all the time about how if I add this additive to my system, it'll have no problems. We do not recommend the use of septic tank additives. There is no scientific proof that these products work as described. And the bacteria in your tank are naturally occurring, and that is what their job is, to break down the solids and to prevent backups in your home. So the less things that we put into our septic tank, the more likely our bacteria can grow and thrive and do exactly what it is their intended purpose: to eat away at those solids and make sure that we don't end up with backups in our home. So as far as septic tank additives go, they are not recommended. One other thought on that is, just to keep to just not add additional solids that are not going to break down in your septic tank versus adding additives. So we've got shield your field. So basically this is about protection of your sand filter and your leach lines. Big thing. You're going to have a lot of people over. Make sure you cordon off that area where your septic system is. You do not want to be driving your vehicle or having people park their cars on top of your septic system. The weight from a vehicle can actually cause pipes to crush and to become out of alignment, causing potential issues with your system. One other thing is, do not plant trees or shrubs too close to your septic system. Trees and shrubs thrive off of nutrient-rich water. And one of the best places for them to find that nutrient-rich water is within your septic system. There are certain trees that are worse than others. However, any tree that's in need of water and nutrients is going to have its roots eventually find its way to your septic system. If you have very mature trees around the area of your septic system to the point where the leaf line covers the area of your septic system, you want to keep in mind that your system probably already has root intrusion and that it may cause you some significant issues in the future. We're not telling you to go take down your trees. We all enjoy trees. Just for you to be aware that large trees and putting a system in tree lines can actually cause your useful life of your system to be decreased by up to 50%. So instead of maybe your system having a 30-year lifespan, it may only last you 15 to 20. Some other things to keep in mind: if you are adding an addition or a patio or pool, you want to make sure that you confirm the location of your septic system before you start construction. You do not want to build your addition, your patio, or your pool onto or into your septic system. If you cover your sand filter or your conventional trench or leach system with concrete, it no longer can receive air, and it will not be able to use the bacteria that's existing in the soil and the upper layers to help break down and help the bacteria die off, the bad bacteria die off. So we definitely want to make sure that we are not putting these items on top of our system. The other thing to keep in mind when you are doing home additions or patios or pools and pool decks is you are eventually going to have that septic tank pumped out. So make sure that wherever you put these things, that you maintain good access to your septic tank. You want to make sure there's enough room around it so that the contractor can get his truck and his pipes in to get that septic tank pumped out. We have seen numerous times where unfortunately people have put their additions on top of their septic tanks and then unfortunately use a window to open up the floor and then use a window to get the piping in, and that is no fun for anybody to get their septic tanks pumped out. You do want to make sure that if you have roof drains or sump pumps, that you have those draining away from your septic system. You don't want to add any excess water to the septic system area. In addition, your roof drains and sump pumps should never be directed into your septic system. That's just excess water that you do not need flowing through your system and can cause you many issues in the long run. With that being said, all of your other plumbing should be connected to your septic system. This includes your laundry, all sinks, and all toilets. Showers as well. So don't strain your drain. So what do we mean by this? Well, don't concentrate all of your water use at one time. So maybe instead of running your dishwasher while taking a shower and running a load of laundry, maybe we can spread that out a little bit throughout the day. Run your dishwasher, then take a shower, then run laundry in the evening while other, spread that water use out. Sometimes when we end up running all of those items at the same time, we cause a large influx of water into our septic tank all at once. And that can disturb that solids layer, causing solids to flow into our system, our drain field or our sand filter. Once again, causing potential backups into our home and not allowing that system to work properly. Important, fix plumbing leaks. A leaking toilet can waste 200 gallons of water per day. A running toilet wastes 1 gallon every 30 seconds. And a dripping faucet uses 3 gallons per year, 3,000 gallons per year. That's a lot of water. And if you happen to be on public water and have a water meter in your house, that's a lot of added cost to your water bill that you don't need. We do, of course, recommend that you install water efficient fixtures such as low flow toilets and low flow shower heads. Protected and inspected. Don't dig in the area of your system or build anything over it. Do learn the location of your septic tank and sand filter or leach field. And make sure to keep your septic tank cover accessible for inspections and pumping. The number one thing we can tell you to do when it comes to maintenance of your septic system is to have your septic tank pumped out. It is recommended that septic tanks get pumped out every 3 to 5 years. The more usage you have on your system, the more frequently we recommend that you get it pumped out. So if you are somebody that has large parties all summer long or are planning a big event, we would highly recommend that you have portable toilets brought in and that you just keep in mind that your septic tank is going to need to be pumped out if you don't do that pretty quickly thereafter. If you're somebody who isn't doing a lot of that stuff, your tank can probably wait 5 years. In particular, if you're not flushing any of these items we've mentioned and you're using septic safe toilet paper and you're not adding a lot of harsh chemicals and not using a lot of water, you can definitely go 5 years, no problem, without having your septic tank pumped out. The more of these things that you add into your system, the more often you're going to want to have that tank pumped out. And it is the number one preventative maintenance item you can do to ensure that your system lasts for 30 plus years. So why is it important that we kind of make sure that we maintain all of these things and keep our septic system in top functioning order? On-site wastewater treatment systems help protect your health and the environment. They are there to help remove harmful bacteria and to prevent disease-causing viruses and pathogens from entering our neighborhoods and our streams and waterways, our local beaches. so that we don't have these outbreaks of cholera and things from our past that we've heard about. Wastewater also carries nutrients such as nitrogen, phosphorus, and organic waste. These nutrients can cause oxygen levels to be depleted in our waterways. When that happens, it's harder for fish to live and to continue to populate our waterways. So it's important that we try to limit the amount of these items from actually entering our waterways. On-site wastewater treatment systems are designed to remove or break down these contaminants before they enter the groundwater or surface water, which is why it's important for us to keep these items functioning well and doing exactly what we want them to do. So if you live in Erie County, to request a copy of your septic system location drawing, you can email us at sewage@erie.gov. If we have one on file, which we do for about 90% of homes, we can email you a copy of that drawing so you have it on record at your house. If you have any specific questions about septic systems in Erie County, feel free to email me myself, or you can actually email sewage@erie.gov. Our website is also listed there where we do have a lot of information on septic systems, as well as how to get a system replaced and maintenance and tips, etc. on our website. And for all you other counties, people living in other counties, we have the websites available for Allegheny, Cattaraugus, Chautauqua, Genesee and Orleans, Niagara, and Wyoming on this slide. Feel free to reach out to your individual health departments. Many of them do have records of where septic systems are located, and their websites all do include useful information and specific county-specific information related to septic systems. And that is the end of what I had to say here today.
Jen, we have lots of questions, and these could go to Joanna or Jen.
Yeah, I'm
Joanna,
just
do you
gonna
want me
real
to?
quick, I know one of the questions was about the rebates, so I'm just gonna real quick go over this slide. So for those of you who are wondering, if you live in Erie, Cattaraugus, or Chautauqua counties, or if you are in one of the other counties mentioned in the Lake Erie watershed, you are eligible to receive $30 rebate off of a septic tank pump out. Lots of words. So what'll happen is there'll be instructions emailed to you after this webinar, and you'll fill out a form, submit proof that you had a septic tank pump out completed after this webinar, so like a receipt, and we will mail you a $30 check. So you can have this rebate done by your current septic tank pumper. You do not have to use a specific one. So keep that in mind. So you must participate in one of either this webinar or one of our in-person webinars, or rather workshops, and you will be eligible for one of these rebates while funding lasts. So we have funding through the spring for up to 150 rebates.
Joanna, there are two other questions about the rebate. Do you want me to just give those to you right now?
Sure, yeah.
So one is, does the rebate expire? We don't need to pump out again until next year.
Yeah, so this funding only goes through the spring of next year. So it will be first come, first served until the funding runs out through the spring of 2023. And even if you aren't due for a pump out, you will be eligible for one of our door prizes today. For those of you who entered your email address, if you have an aerobic treatment system, you will be entered to win a free inspection there. And for everyone else, we're giving away 5 Yifty gift cards, which are really awesome. They can be used at a number of local restaurants and shops in Western New York. So those will be, we'll use a random number generator to select the winners for that, and I will email you after this workshop.
Okay, and then another question, really two people's question is, they just had their system pumped. Is there a rebate for people who already had their system pumped?
No, it would be so someone who participates in this webinar and then gets a pump out after the fact.
Okay. And then do you want me to moderate the questions, or do you want to do that? Either way is fine.
Yes, please.
Okay.
You can.
So, what about when you do bleach loads of laundry. Is that significant? So laundry and bleach, how does that affect our septic systems?
Jennifer, that'll be you. You're muted.
I'm sorry about that. I realized it was muted. So yes, I mean, anytime you're introducing a large quantity of bleach, which hopefully when you're doing laundry, you're not using a large quantity of bleach. But if you are using a significant amount, or if you do that regularly, that will cause significant issues with the way the septic tank operates. Though we understand that some of that is necessary from time to time, we would say you should limit the amount of bleach you're doing or the amount of times you're doing bleach to laundry. The other option for you is to take them to a laundromat, which would prevent it from entering your septic tank.
So there were a couple questions. Thank you for that. There were a couple questions about garbage disposals. One was, they're kind of related. One was, my garbage disposal has a biochar addition with good bacteria, specifically for the septic tanks. Does this make a difference? And then another question was, are there septic rated disposals? Does that matter?
So I believe that there are products on the market that they say are septic safe or septic rated. However, the basic principle is still going to remain the same. The more additional solids you add to your septic tank, the more often you're going to need to have that cleaned out. Regardless of if they add additional good bacteria into the system or if they chop things up into finer pieces, that's still additional solid waste that's going into your tank that doesn't necessarily need to be there. And it'll take longer for the bacteria to get around to making that small enough to be passed through the system.
Okay. And then the next question, I think you probably addressed this after the person asked it, but I'll just pitch it out there. The person asked, is RIDX, capital RID hyphen X, or another septic product a good idea or a waste of money?
So I think, as I mentioned, we do not recommend the use of any septic cleaning RIDX or product such as that. Your septic tank is designed to work the way it is without any additional chemicals. There is no 100% proof that these products do exactly what they say that they do.
The next question is one I'm curious about. The person asked, can I dump the RV tanks into my septic tank?
My answer to you is no. And there's two main reasons for that. One, some RV tanks do contain chemicals in the septic tanks, and whether you use that or not. And two, your septic system is not rated to have that additional flow added to it. So you can cause overuse of your system. Also, it's usually it's a large additional flow full of solids that you are pumping directly into your septic tank. And because of that disturbance that you're causing when you add that, you are likely to break up the scum layer as well as cause the solids layer to float and possibly make its way into your drain field. If you do dump your RV tank into your septic tank, you would expect your longevity of your system to be reduced. And if it does have chemicals, it'll cause bacteria to die off.
Jen, I became aware of something recently talking to the leader of our sewage. He's the deputy commissioner for our sewer management system, and he was saying that for folks who pay, there are some people who have septic systems, but they still pay some tax towards the septic system. And he was saying for those individuals, they are qualified to receive free dumps at the wastewater treatment plants. Just to throw that out there too.
Oh, wow, that's great.
So if you're in that category, just be aware of that. Okay, so the next question was clarification of the functional necessity of a standardly designed inlet baffle would be appreciated. I've been told a simple horizontal pipe into the tank is fine if your tank is concrete with a standard wall between the two sections.
Oh, okay. So the functionality of an inlet baffle is to prevent gas buildup from exiting out through the outlet and potentially airlogging your system. In the event that your tank is possibly on the older side and that baffle has fallen off, there are means to replace that without actually having to replace your septic tank. The other thing, you're talking about the inlet. The outlet baffle is is part of this as well. There's an inlet and an outlet baffle. The outlet baffle typically holds the filter, the effluent filter, and is part of that whole system. So that's why that side's in particular important. Inlet baffle, once again, prevents gas from entering your home. That's what its main purpose is. I have worked with contractors in the past where we have installed a T coming off of the main inlet pipe using PVC pipe that is perforated. That does act as the originally designed baffle. It is usually only used in remediational purposes if the remainder of the tank is still in good shape. I hope that answers that question.
The next question is, I had to dig up my distribution box to check it was working properly. What is the best way to cover it up? Also, the cover has a hairline crack and I pried it open. Do I need a new cover?
So if the cover is still intact, although there's a hairline crack, at this point, you probably don't need to replace it. The best way to cover it up is cover it right back up with the soil you took off of it and plant grass back over the top. You can put a marker in to indicate where it's located for future purposes should you need to access it. For the most part, we don't typically recommend digging up the distribution box on a regular basis. The more you disturb it, the more potential there is for it to settle. But about 12 inches of soil should be going on top of that with a nice grass layer.
Okay. And you know, Joanna, if we hit time, you might want to do your exit poll and then we could stay on after that to do more questions. And I'll just let you decide if you want to do that now.
Yeah, so folks, I put the link in the chat box for SurveyMonkey. Please head to that for the exit poll. So you'll see a link in blue at SurveyMonkey. You're going to want to fill out the exit poll there. It should be 5 questions.
Okay. And I know that some people were having trouble finding things. Maybe could you email that out also, maybe?
Yep,
Okay.
I will do that.
Okay, so we'll keep going with the questions. And
Yep.
we just had our system pumped. We do not have a copy of our septic location. So I guess the question is, what should we do if we don't know where the septic is at?
So if you live in Erie County, you can email us at sewage@erie.gov. You can call us at 716-961-6800. And those are the 2 main ways. If you do email us, we will if we have one on file, we will email you back a PDF of where your septic system location is. If you don't have access to email, feel free to call us and we'll put a copy in the mail for you.
That's excellent. A question was, how much does a septic tank pump usually cost?
Joanna, did anybody ever give you an answer to that question by any chance?
So I've heard different things depending on the size of your tank. I think the most common answer I've gotten is about $200 to $300. But it depends again on the size, the number of bedrooms in your home, how big of a tank you have. And I see Dan just put $300 plus in the chat.
Okay, another question is, what is an aerobic system? And so I think maybe you were talking about anaerobic. So I guess the difference between an anaerobic and aerobic system, if you could explain that.
Sure. So I think in the opening poll at the very end, it did mention that if you have an aerobic system that you should enter your email address for potential other door prize. So what do we mean by an aerobic system? An aerobic system, instead of your septic tank, there will be another tank that has electricity running to it. The purpose of most of the electricity is to run a pump. So unlike our septic tanks that work in a more anaerobic state, The aerobic units do the exact same thing as our septic systems, only we pump air into the tank to allow a different type of bacteria to break down the solids in the tank. They were popular to be installed in areas where potentially you're too close to a waterway, or you have a constraining factor on your lot that didn't provide for enough space for a traditional septic system. And they were particularly used in the 90s, maybe the early 2000s, for multiple different applications. But typically the main difference is just that you pump air into them.
So the next question was, first initial pump with a new septic we were told was over 5 years. Is that correct?
Our recommendation would be 3 to 5 years, so 5 years, yes.
Okay, sorry, I lost my. Is there a difference between what detergent is used in the dishwasher? I've heard from one of the septic companies that the packs we use in the dishwasher could be causing an issue versus straight powder or liquid.
Right. So the issue with packs, this goes for both dishwasher and for your laundry, is that there is an additional coating involved. And on those packs, a plastic or a wax type coating. There's some concern that those don't fully break down before they're expelled from your unit into the waste stream. So over time, yes, there is a potential that those coatings that hold the liquids into the little packs would be just additional to your septic tank solids layer, and they aren't going to break down.
Sorry, I was muted. I'm sorry, I was muted. If drains are slow, what can you safely use to clean the drains?
A snake.
But no chemicals, really recommend a snake, right?
Right. I mean, no, we do not recommend chemicals. A snake would be your best option, but some other ideas would be white vinegar and baking soda. A mixture of the two causes a foaming action in the drain that is reported to do very well in helping to clear out clogs, especially that are in the upper portions of a drain. You can take your traps off yourself and empty them out and clean them and put them back in. You want to stay away from your harsher chemicals.
Next question. Can I use a 1-ton lawn roller over my lawn where the septic lines are?
It would not be recommended. Anything you do that would add weight to your lines, you have the potential of causing those lines to shift or break. Kind of the purpose of a lawn roller is to make your lawn flat, so you're changing the general elevations, and that can affect the alignment of your lines underground.
Have you heard of the process of blowing air through your lines to aerate and extend the life of the septic leach bed? If so, how often should that be done?
Yes, I've heard of the process. What I would say about it is that it is a stopgap. Yes, by doing that, you will, especially if you're having trouble already with your septic system, by doing some of these air blowing or by doing some chemical treatments that are out there, you will buy yourself time, but it will never fix or repair the septic system.
The next question is, does antibacterial soap like dish soap or hand soap affect the septic system?
So it would be thought, the general thought is that yes, over time it does affect the system. The purpose of antibacterial soaps is to the antibacterial, is to help cause bacteria to die off on hands or on dishes. Do I think that that's your biggest issue when it comes to septic tanks? Probably not. But we don't think that it is beneficial either.
This is a question for Joanna. Will this webinar be available for reviewing? So will there be a recording published?
Yes, it's being recorded and it'll be available on our website, which I put in the chat. It's www.erie.gov/septicsmart. So you'll be able to view this in the future.
Great. And the next question is, are surface septic crock caps on buried risers down to the crocks an acceptable option instead of having to dig out the crocks to be pumped? Can you
Okay,
read that again?
So if I'm understanding correctly, what you're asking is from the manhole in the top of the septic tank, if you have a riser that goes to the surface, is that acceptable versus having to dig down all the way to the interior or the below grade manhole cover? Yes, risers are acceptable. The only thing is they have to be buried below grade. Now, that doesn't mean that they have to be 12 inches or 24 inches below grade, but they cannot be exposed to the surface, as they are a potential hazard, especially if children should get access to them and fall inside. That would not be a good option.
There's the question. Next question is, I have a conventional trench system built in 1991. Could there be a filter between the tank and the D box that I covered over with my deck?
So a 1991 septic system in Erie County, there's a couple possible options. Yes, is the answer. So sometime in the 90s, very often following a septic tank, what was installed was what was known as a gravel box. So it was literally a concrete tank full of gravel that the sewage flowed into and then back out of. The purpose of the gravel box was to act as a filter, kind of like what we use nowadays as an effluent filter. It was made to ensure that there were no solids, hopefully, making it from your septic tank into your leach field or sand filter. From my experience, those are beginning to clog now to the point where your septic systems are getting slow. So if you can't find the issue, I would probably consider that there might be something in there.
Next question. Have you seen a pump in the back end of a sand field for excess water runoff?
My answer to that is there should not be a pump in the back end of a sand field for extra water runoff. I don't know if what you mean by that is that the pump is following the sand filter prior to a downstream system, or if the sump is following a sand filter and it goes nowhere, but maybe to a creek or a ditch. So there's a couple different answers there. If there's a sand filter followed by a pump that does not go to a buried downstream absorption trench system, that would be a potential issue, and we should talk about that. Maybe you could email me separately if that's a specific question.
The next question, I think the next question is kind of hard to answer, but the question was, how much does the whole system cost to replace?
So there's many factors that are going to affect the cost. For the most part, we're probably looking right now at somewhere between 12 and 18,000 to replace a septic system. If you live in an area that has high constraints, high bedrock, difficult access points where they can't get trucks into your backyard where your system is, you can expect that cost to increase sometimes significantly to the point of 20 to 25,000. It can be a costly thing to replace.
Joanna, this is for you. Would like to do the polling, but I'm listening to you on my phone and watching on my TV. I'm not able to do the polling. So if I understand correctly, you said that you're going to email out the polling?
Yep, I will send out the Survey Monkey link to everyone after this workshop. So you can fill that out and then we will have a record that you completed the poll.
Okay. And Joanna, are they being graded on their results of the poll, or does everybody equally go into the raffle and stuff?
Yes, if you do not answer correctly, no, I'm just kidding. You will not be graded. As long as you fill out the questions, you will be eligible for the rebate.
Excellent. Okay, and we just have, I think, a few more. And Joanna, is it okay if people who drop off at this point, if they just don't want to be here for all the Q&A?
Yep, absolutely. Just make sure you fill out the Survey Monkey link in your email. And for those who have put question and answer questions, I've tried to answer them. I think there's just one holdout that I don't know the answer to. So we can get to that after the chat is through.
We still have 75 attendees, so people I think are really into this. This is excellent. So a couple more questions. A bit strange, but we moved into our house with a septic system and opened up what we believe is the concrete cover to the sand filter and saw salamanders inside the sand filter. Should we be alarmed? I put vent covers on top of the PVC pipes. They would be covered somewhat.
So it's not 100% unusual to find small creatures living in and around septic tanks or some of the other tanks, like your pump tanks at the end of a sand filter. It's not that unusual. It's not that unusual to find that they've fallen in there accidentally and drowned. I would say that if there were a lot of them, I'd be slightly concerned, and I'd probably have a contractor come out and figure out if there's an access point that they're getting in, but probably honestly putting vented covers over the PVC pipes is probably your best answer.
Another question is, when the septic is cleaned out, do all layers get removed? Scum, liquid, and sludge.
So yes, they do remove as much of the scum, liquid, and sludge layer as possible. However, you don't want to ever fully empty your septic tank. You want to leave a little bit of the sludge layer and definitely a little bit of the liquid layer. There's a couple reasons for that. One, that sludge layer that's in there is already packed with really great bacteria that you want to keep in your system, and you don't want to start 100% from scratch every time you have your septic tank pumped out. So they will leave some in there. Also, you never want to completely empty a septic tank, especially if you live in areas with high groundwater or heavily saturated clay soils, because it can actually cause your septic tank to pop out of the ground.
Excellent. And then a lot of people saying thank you. And one person said, oh, my thing jumped around, but a person said, I have a 50-year-old septic system. What to do? It's starting to fail. What should be done?
Well, first things first, I'd probably ensure that I have a contractor come out and just take a look, get the septic tank pumped, have them take a look around. To be honest with you, if it's 50 years old, you're looking at having to start to replace it, to think about that process of replacing it. There isn't a lot of, so with septic systems, one thing to know is that there isn't a lot of repair mechanisms. There are stopgaps. There are things we can do to maybe get another year or two if we need to get financing together, but there isn't a lot of, well, we'll just do this and it's fixed. The fix for most failing septic systems, quite honestly, is replacement. When pipes get to a point where they're falling apart or they're breaking apart, or when tree roots have gotten to the point where they've just encompassed the interior of that pipe, or what ends up happening, your pipe is bedded in stone, and over time, there's what we call a biofilm layer that gets created on the stone, which prevents water from entering through the crevices that are created by the stone naturally. And there's really no good way to permanently fix any of that. So unfortunately, when your system is at that point where, I don't know what your exact issues are, but your yard is wet when it's really dry outside, there's spots that are a little squishy, or There's spots where you can tell where your septic system is because you can see the bright green grass when all your other grass is brown, or your grass is 6 inches taller in those areas versus the rest of the lawn. Um, your drains are slow and you know it's not your drains themselves, or you get backups on occasion. Those are sure signs that you're heading down the path to need to replace your system.
Okay. Person asked, I have a 1,000 gallon tank. Does Erie County require a minimum of 1,500 gallon tanks now?
For all new construction, we do require a minimum of a 1,500 gallon tank. If you are replacing your system and do need to remove the tank and put in a new one, we do require it to be a 1,500 gallon. If you have a 3-bedroom home and 3 or 4-bedroom home and you have an existing 1,000 gallon concrete tank that the baffles and the interior wall are still in good condition, we will allow you to keep that tank and not add anything additional. If you have more bedrooms than that, then yes, you would be required to add possibly a 500 gallon tank following your 1,000 gallon tank, or just replace it.
A person asked to go back to the slide for the county websites. So if you could put that on. And then next question is, do new septic tanks have a bacterial starter kit, and are these otherwise available?
To be honest, I've never seen a bacterial starter kit. I believe the basic premise of how we look at starting a septic tank is our naturally occurring bacteria will start that for us.
And if you have a new build home, how long does it take for your system to get the needed bacteria to start?
I don't know if I have an exact answer on that. Pretty much as soon as you start using it, you start introducing bacteria.
And then a question, or maybe more of a statement, but I'm quite sure my pump company vacuums the tank clean and even hoses down the walls. Sounds like this is not the right way. Should I question them next time? Should both baffles be hosed out? Sometimes I uncover both, and they say as long as the water is flowing freely from the house into the tank, no need to hose out further.
Um, Am I going to say that what they're doing is wrong? No. As I just said in the last answer, you, as you use your system, will always be introducing new bacteria. So is there some people out there that believe they should take every ounce of everything out of there? Yes. Are there some people out there that believe that they should be washing down the insides of the tank? Yes. I know a lot of companies that do hose down the sides of the tanks. As far as uncovering both baffles, they should always be uncovering the outflow side for sure, as that is standardly where outlet filters are, and those are supposed to be cleaned on a regular basis. I do know a lot of companies that don't necessarily open the first manhole prior on the inlet baffle side. Um, I don't, I kind of agree that it doesn't necessarily need to be hosed out, so to speak, but they should at least be pumping from that, making sure they're getting some of the solids out of that side. So if they're not opening both sides, they may not be getting the solids out of the first side. Does that make sense? Hopefully.
Josh, you may be muted.
Sorry. I think this is the final question we'll take. So do you have any particular disposition regarding aerators?
I'm assuming you're referring to aerobic units. No, not necessarily. When they are, when aerobic units are functioning properly and well maintained, they are as effective, if not slightly more effective, at breaking down the solids and the scum layers than a standard septic tank. There is some actual evidence out there that they do a much better job at breaking down solids than a standard septic tank. However, I add the caution that they do require regular maintenance. You really should have a professional come out and have them inspected once a year. And keep a maintenance contract on hand because they do tend to have a lot of mechanical failures. So I don't have a problem with them. I think they're great. However, the maintenance issues can be difficult for homeowners.
And Joanna, Jen, I'm sorry, there was one question I missed above. I was just scanning through. Does Erie County offer lid risers for purchase?
Erie County does not specifically sell any septic tank components or septic system components. But if you reach out to any local contractor, I'm sure they'd be more than happy to sell them to you and possibly even give you a quote to install them.
Okay, well, Jen and Joanna, that was the last of the questions.
Thank you. There
Great-
was one
great
question in the
answers.
Q&A that I wasn't able to answer. And so Peter asked, I have a holding tank. Does that count? I'm not entirely sure what that's in reference to, Peter. Would you like me to unmute you so you can ask that question? I'm going to unmute you. How about that? So Peter, I believe you are unmuted if you'd like to ask your question about the holding tank. Nope. Okay.
If
Not a
you
problem.
don't want to ask it specifically, I'll try to give you an answer. But if you at some point in time would like to speak with me on a individual basis, feel free to give me a call or email me. My information's right here, and I'd be more than happy to talk to you about your very specific question. In general, Erie County does not allow holding tanks for residential structures. A holding tank is literally a septic tank that doesn't go anywhere. So all the effluent stays within the septic tank, and you have to have that septic tank pumped out on a regular basis. Now, I do know there are a few commercial facilities within Erie County that have holding tanks left over from days gone by. And what I would tell you is that that holding tank needs to be pumped out regularly. That can mean once a quarter, once a year. It depends on how much usage you have in your building. And I hope that helps answer that. But if you have more specific questions, please reach out and I'd be more than happy to try to talk you through them.
Great. So thank you, everyone. I appreciate you staying over time. Hopefully you got your questions answered. I will send a follow-up email and I will include that SurveyMonkey link for you to do the exit poll. And I will also include instructions on how to redeem your $30 pump out rebate. Also, like I said, follow the website for information on your septic tank, www.erie.gov/septicsmart. And there will be information there about our in-person workshops as well as the recording of this workshop if you'd like to refer to it. So thank you, everyone, and